And good morning, everybody. We're live. Congratulations. You made it through the week. Another week of amazing food safety, food quality, awesome food that everybody enjoys every single day. But a lot of times you don't get that credit and the recognition you deserve for all the hard work you do. So I and Alex today are going to say to you, good job. You did a
Good
really good
job.
job, and we appreciate all that you do. My name is Bryan Armentrout, and I'm with the Food Leadership Group. And every week at this time, at 8 a.m. Mountain Time, 10 a.m. Eastern, we go live on LinkedIn and YouTube, and we talk about food safety. And I get to bring on amazing guests and have a conversation around that. And really, the star of the show is you, because we're here for you to answer your questions and hopefully convey a little knowledge on a particular topic. And that's always what's fun about this. And as we get started here, good morning, Ryan. This is something that's always fun and I love to do as well, is we connect with everybody and let us know where in the world you're at. I am in Loveland, Colorado this week. And Alex Hanley with the, let's see, your company name. I didn't write down. There it is. Navigate Food Safety. Yeah, I know. Brain fart there. There's something crazy going on. Sorry about that, Alex. How are you doing today?
No problem.
I mean, it's like written, like, yeah, right there on the screen. Other way. There we go. Right there on the screen. Right there. So where are you at today?
I'm in Prince Edward Island on the east coast of Canada.
Now, are you East Coast time there, or is there are you far enough out where there's another time zone? I don't think so, right? There's only, so what's the
I'm on
current time
Atlantic time zone. Yeah.
So 11.
The only thing that's farther east in North America would be Newfoundland, and they've got kind of a half-hour time zone, not a whole.
Oh, really? So kind of like that's a weird little thing that I learned a few years ago. Is India is on a half. The whole country is a half hour off from everybody else, which is kind of weird.
No fact.
Look at it. This is awesome. All kinds of wonderful people filing in here this morning. So Carol, Morgan, of course, Maureen, Elena, Brent. Wow, look at this. This is awesome. Jose's checking in as well. Gotta love it when Jose is here. Amazing. So Jose recently won an award, an auditing award for his fantastic work. So Jose is always amazing on that side. And Alex is so surprised by this that he froze a little bit. There he is. He's back. Everything was perfect before we started, but that's okay. We'll figure all this out. So let's start with our coffee this morning. I'm looking for some coffee here. So everybody join us for a ceremonial drink. Get that dopamine going. Fantastic. And of course, we wouldn't be able to start the food safety chat, Alex, without a dad joke. Are you ready for today's dad joke?
Sure. Go ahead.
What do computers like to eat? Chips.
Chips, eh?
Nice. I enjoy those way too much. Too much. So gosh, we've got a ton of material to go over here today. And what we wanted to talk about, and gosh, Alex, when we were preparing for this chat, I think we had a completely separate chat on our own, because we talked about this for pretty much an hour on all the different topics around this. And one of the things that I talk about here on the chat quite a bit is the basics, right? If you want to be good at food safety, you want to be good at quality, you want to be successful in your career, you have to understand and use the tools that are available to you and execute them in the correct way. And I think this is why this topic is so important, is one of the areas that seems like we really don't do a good job on is CAPA, corrective and preventive actions. And it just seems like every year, Alex, and we see this complaint from retailers and the consumers, is recalls just keep happening and screw ups keep happening, and it doesn't seem to get fixed. And if we're going to be performing root cause analysis and figuring out how we can correct problems that happened and figure out how to keep things from happening in the future, that we would be really, really good at this. But we're not, are we?
Well, no, we're not. It's kind of funny when early in, so I used to be a food safety auditor. Maybe I should say a little bit like I started as a food safety auditor, and then I started realizing that the same problems over and over in the facilities that I inspected. And I thought, okay, audits, like we're just saying, okay, like you're good or you're not good. We're not helping people make things better. So that's how I kind of shifted from auditing to being a like consultant. But really, it was not so much for the consulting as it was for figuring out how to help people go from here to here. Okay, so that was the big shift in my career. And one of the first, like the very first plant that I helped go from here to here, when we got our audit, the auditor came up and said, "Oh, you know what? Like everywhere I go, there's 3 programs that everybody gets wrong: management review, CAPA, and internal audits." And those are 3 programs. Like after 10, 15 years, I can say like, oh, I've looked quite a bit at those, and those are programs that are very different in a management system. They're programs that everybody has, whether you're making tires, running a hospital, like everybody's got like if you're a certification body, you need to have those programs. You need to have an internal audit program. You need to have management review. You need to have a CAPA program. So those are super widely used in the industry, and not just in the food safety industry, but in all industry. Yet we get them wrong 100% of the time. And it was pretty funny because yesterday we had another webinar on this year CAPA, because it's an interesting topic, and it's going to take a little while to get it fixed. But I mean, that's what at Navigate Food Safety we're kind of committed to leading and doing everything we can to help the industry fix that. So we had a webinar, and Tammy Van Buren, who's a compliance manager at SQF, was on the call. And it was really funny because as we had a prep call for this. Well, I had a prep call, or a couple of prep calls, with Tammy and with the other people who were there on the webinar. And Tammy told me, "Oh yeah, like there's 3 programs that everybody gets wrong all the time." And it was pretty funny because it was exactly the same 3 programs. So it's a widely known fact, or it's a widely accepted fact that those programs are super challenging. And I think they're challenging because it's a lot more complicated to get that right than to get environmental monitoring right, or to get allergen control right, or to get maintenance right, which those programs are extremely challenging to start with. I mean, the boar's head thing and the listeria recall in Canada for silk and all that show that environmental monitoring, not everybody gets that, and allergen, not everybody gets that, and maintenance for food safety, there's all kinds of recalls and all kinds of like serious events for foods, like for foreign material contamination. But in my book, management review, internal audits, and CAPA are programs that are there to help fix the other programs. So they're even more challenging than the other, like all the other, like 50 other programs that we deal with food safety. So I'm not super surprised at the state of affairs, but I think they've got a huge leverage. Like they're a huge leverage. That's why I think it's so important to fix CAPA.
No, yeah, absolutely. And so Jose, this is why Jose Sabal is such a good teacher as well, is he teaches you habits and good practices. And one of the things that Jose has taught me, thank you, Jose, is to define terms. And we're seeing a couple of comments in here relative to that. So as we start our conversation here, Alex, how would you define those 2 terms, corrective action and preventive action?
Well, I'll tell you, I'll not answer your question, and I won't answer your question, but it's a super interesting and important question. And one of the things that I find is a challenge is leading to that challenge is that people have different definitions of corrective actions, preventive actions. We use the same words to mean different things. So actually, when I say a corrective action, I will define them. That's my definition, but with the kind of the warning that this is not a universal definition. And one of the things we have to fix within the industry is focus on the things that need to be done. And different people will be using different terms. And it doesn't matter the terms that we use, but we need to understand that when I use a term in a specific situation within SQF, it means one thing. And in a different context, it means another thing. So on that note, I have a funny story about the notion of a hazard in Codex and in general life. If you make a note, we can talk about that later because it's super important. It reinforces what Jose is saying. We need to define terms. So a corrective action for me, a corrective action is when you look at, so correction would be fixing the issue. So if the issue, if the roof is leaking, then you fix the roof. Okay, so that could be the correction. Depends on the people, like Some people might call that a corrective action, but fixing the specific issue, or there's a hose on the floor, you pick the hose up. Okay, now you need to look at why did that happen. We don't want to have just a short-term thing. We need to fix the why of why that happened, and that would be the corrective action.
Mm-hmm.
I'm
Gotcha.
saying
Right.
something right now about the roof leaking, and we developed a little glossary for kind of defining the terms, because I think there's like 10 or 15 different terms that we're going to be using, just super basic terms: short-term corrective action, long-term corrective action, correction, preventive action, root cause analysis, cause. So there's a lot of words that need to be described, defined, and we have a little video. So maybe Ellen, you can send Bryan the link to the video. We posted it on LinkedIn, that kind of shows the roof leak with the different words. What's the correction? What's the corrective action? And so on and so forth. So Ellen did a fantastic job on that. So she'll send you the link.
Nice.
Like I could talk about definitions all day. I'll give you an example of where things get very slippery. So corrective action might be like dealing with the why. Okay, let's say we deal with the why, and the preventive action would be dealing with other situations that have not happened so far, but that could happen. So a preventive action would be, so let's say, like with my example with the roof is leaking. So you could say that the correction or the corrective action deals with the actual roof that's leaking. But then you might say, okay, we haven't done a good maintenance on the roof for a while. Maybe we can take an infrared camera and see if there are other areas that are weak on the roof that need to be patched before they start leaking. And that would be a preventive action. So that'd be an example of, okay, we're not just fixing what this happened and waiting for the next thing to happen. We want to see what else is going to happen. So preventive.
Right. Well, and that's a good point. And that's, I think that's why it's really important. And we're getting some really good comments here as well, is that we talk about it here in the opening for the chat, Alex, is, hey, listen, if you're doing a good job, nobody notices, but we're here to tell you, thanks, we appreciate it. That's preventive action, right? If you're doing a good job at being a quality manager, a food safety manager in a plant, you're keeping things from happening. So the example I like to use, and this is why I think these always help, is these examples. Pest control, right? Nice simple example. So pest control, you found a mouse in a trap. Oh, dang it, right? And so you kind of look around and you're like, okay, I need to correct this. What's going on? And you find there's a hole in the seal that the mice from the outside are getting in. You're like, oh, okay. So my corrective action is to fix that hole so the mice won't get in and get in the trap. Great. Preventive action would be, okay, let me think about this. We're in the middle of summer. Do I think that activity relative to rodents is going to pick up in the fall when the temperatures start going down and the mice are looking for nice warm places to be? I'm going to put in more traps, and I'm going to go around and make sure that there's no other holes, because I'm expecting the rodent activity to increase. So I'm going to prevent future incidents that haven't happened yet.
So, and that's a great example of a preventive action, and also a great example of how things become really slippery with our definitions. Okay?
Yes.
Because you've got preventive action in the context of a program, in the context of a pest control program, and the whole notion of, like we say, preventive, but it should be an integrated pest management program. So like pest control is just like, it's, I would say old millennia, but I mean, it's just really, really old. So we integrate. So when we talk about an integrated pest management program, we integrate preventive methods, okay? So as part of that preventive program for pests, it's the same thing as a preventive maintenance program. We're preventing things from happening through our preventive maintenance program. So the word preventive is used in a certain way within a program, and then we have a preventive action within a CAPA program. And those are two different things. They're not the same thing, okay? Because see how slippery it is. And Jose is totally right with saying we need to define terms. And within the industry, I mean, in the SQF code, they say CAPA is this thing here, or corrective action is this thing here. And then they say also known as corrective and preventive action. But whoa, we're saying that corrective action is this is also corrective and preventive action. It's the exact same thing. Where does preventive action fit in there? So there's a bit of discrepancy between the definitions, and we just need to work it out. It doesn't really matter. It's not the end of the world. And that's why I say we need to look at what are we doing in a pest control program, an integrated pest management program. There's a ton of stuff that we're doing to prevent pest entry, keeping the doors closed, good sanitation, sanitary design. There's a million preventive things we do. But if I see an infestation, then I need to have a CAPA. And when there's an infestation, in my book, it's critical. And one of the things we talked about yesterday is to say, okay, we need to layer on the levels of controls. Maybe a preventive action is a little bit much when you just find a hose on the floor, but maybe you need to have it when you have a major or critical. So that's one of the things we talked about quickly. But that preventive action is more than just saying, okay, let's go back to our preventive actions within the pest control program. It's kind of another layer, if you want. Quick note: when I froze earlier, I don't know if I'm freezing or not. I see you freeze a little bit at my. I can't look at the comments because when I did that, immediately you saw me freeze. Okay, so I'm going to let you. Do
so
that.
I'll handle the comments here. So Ellen was very nice and put in the link here. I'll pop it up on the screen so you can see it. So there's the link for the CAPA piece of it, and there was a really good question here as well. Oops, where'd you go? Question? Did I get the right one? Wrong one. Hold on. Put that guy down. Is around AI. Where did you go? AI.
I see Ryan's question.
Ryan asked a good question here. That and when we've done some shows on AI, and really, I think AI is very good. I think in the future at helping us with the mundane and the things that we don't want to do. And the example we've used is like hand washing, improving hand washing at the stations, right? You wouldn't want to, you don't have the time to stand there all day, but could you potentially use AI in the future to put a camera on that station and analyze hand washing characteristics to see if there's any patterns or things that AI could pull out, right? So looking at large chunks of data and then trying to figure out what's going on.
Maybe. Yeah. I think AI is a super interesting. Actually, it's like you need to look at both sides. Like the thing about big data is, like the thing about controls is we see that controls can very easily become oppressive. If we're controlling things that don't need to be controlled, we are creating oppression and we are focusing on the wrong things. And I'm not saying AI will focus on the wrong thing. I'm saying whatever we use AI for, we need to have better understanding of what we're trying to do. Like I think AI can be layered after we get our act together, but I don't see us making good use of AI without getting our act together. Let's put it that way. So a necessary step is to get the basics right. And getting CAPA right and getting management review right and getting internal audits right. One of the comments during that the technical manager from Kima, who's done the webinar yesterday, he says, like, garbage in, garbage out. I think Tammy said the same thing. If we don't get good internal audits, you can't get good CAPA. The internal, this is a main input to your CAPA process. So until we do those things right, I don't know that AI can. I think a lot of intelligence is required before we can use artificial intelligence. Let's put it that way.
Yeah, and that's been kind of the fear with people. Oh my goodness, it's going to replace us. No, it's not. Right? You still need the expertise. And as we've talked about, yeah, sure, AI. You can say AI, give me a food safety plan, but it's going to be terrible. It's going to be a terrible food safety plan. So you have to still have the ability to analyze it.
You and I had some conversations about the food safety plan, and I think like you have. I really like your take on kind of the food safety plan is a tool, and really the food safety plan is used like it's in a way it's irrelevant. It's the way people use the food safety plan that's really important. And I know we've had some great conversations on kind of the different, like just breaking it down, like rather than making the flow chart more complicated and more complicated, you say everybody's got receiving and warehousing, everybody's got production, packaging, and then like warehousing and shipping. And if you just understand the risk there and you enable people, like you focus on making that work, that's not like AI is not going to do that.
No, absolutely. So I think, right, and this is a great conversation, and how this then fits into what we're talking about CAPA. So number one is you have to understand what I call the rules of the game. So in this particular frame of reference that I'm using, so to your example, Alex, SQF or something like that, they have a particular model and a way of looking at it, and you have to understand that. You can cause yourself a whole lot of grief if you try and use a different model than what the auditor or the people evaluating your systems are looking at. So kind of keep that in mind when you're doing that. So with that, we'll kind of push forward on this. So why do you think, what are some of the main reasons why corrective and preventive action CAPA programs fail? What are you seeing out there?
Well, we touched on a couple, but I think like you're talking about, like we talked about terms being used. Like, okay, so the first thing is it's complex. The problem is complex. There are many moving parts, and sometimes we're a bit simplistic. So we're kind of not, we don't understand the parts as they are, and so we kind of tend to cut corners that shouldn't be cut, and then and then the thing falls apart. So that's one of the things that I see happening all the time. The other thing is by using the same words to mean different things. The example of preventive, I mean, or preventive action, or like we've got three different ideas for what preventive action means. So that is difficult to start with. So we need to define terms. Until we've defined the terms, we will be in the left field. But we also need to agree on the terms that we're using in a specific case. So if SQF wants this, like the line needs to be clear and unambiguous, and like for the auditor as well as for the sites, because the sites need to be able to say, okay, if I'm doing all these things here, I'm going to be okay. I pass. And if I'm not doing them, I can predict that I'm going to fail. So there's two things to that. First is that line needs to not be moving with every auditor that comes in. I'm sure that everybody on the call has seen for CAPA or for some other things, kind of the shifting line of, oh, it's okay today with Billy, but it's not okay with Sandy, and it's so that's a problem. But the other thing is that sometimes people are they know they're not performing, but they're not getting the message. Like one of the big things that we talked about that we see with CAPA is that the food manufacturing industry thinks there's no problem, thinks they're doing great. And the certification industry thinks, my God, like we all need improvement. But when you look at the non-conformances that the food industry is giving, the certifiers or the food safety auditors are giving to the food manufacturers, very little of that says, CAPA, your CAPA program needs improvement. So it's not surprising that the industry thinks they're doing great, because they're hiring those external agents to come over and challenge their program, and then the inspector is saying, oh no, you're all good, because they're not raising non-conformances. And that's how the certification industry is really telling the manufacturers and the food industry how you're doing. So So somebody yesterday used the term soft audit. So until we do thorough audits, we know that if an audit is not thorough, then there's no reason to trust that audit, if you want. And we know there's a huge issue with trust in the certification industry, because everybody, every kind of brand owner is sending their own auditor or sending their extra this and extra that. It's like there would be no duplication of audits if the brand owners trusted all those certification programs. So to me, like when we look at, I really want to do a kind of a root cause analysis on CAPA. I've got a list there. So the definition of terms is one. Strong audits, like thorough and fair. It can't be unfair. Like when the line shifts, that's not fair. If the line is clear, then that's fair. But if you're over here, then you need to get a non-conformance. And we also need to support the industry in saying, okay, well, what do you have to do to always be above? Because it's not about punishing. It's about, say, first enable. Maybe that's a fourth thing. Maybe we're not enabling the industry and saying, okay, if you do these things, then you're always going to be above the line. But I think those are all parts of the puzzle. But what would you say, Bryan? I mean,
well, and definitely, and Portland here makes a good point, right? So one of those main areas of failure is missing a full root cause analysis. And a lot of times in these programs, right? So the plant has a problem. The quality manager is like, damn it. I've got 900 things on my plate. I really don't have time to dig into this too deeply. I know what's causing this, right? And they jump to a conclusion. They just kind of skip over that whole part and say, oh yeah, I've seen this problem before, and I know what the solution is. I'll just put that in place. Well, first question to your point then as an auditor is, okay, well, if this happened before and it happened again, your corrective action didn't really work, did it? And then they get a lot of pushback around that side of it. So I think that's a big problem, right? Is jumping to conclusion, and you see that quite a bit.
Yeah, jumping to conclusion. One of the things that I learned through not that I learned, but I wasn't aware of how much. Like, I knew that Tammy, the compliance manager for SQF, is very passionate about root cause analysis, but she teaches it all the time, and she's got background in the automotive industry. Somebody mentioned that in the hospital industry they've got sector they've got a good program. In the automotive industry they also had something very good. Tammy says she teaches it all the time, and one of the things that's very important for her is to have the right people in the room when they're doing the root cause analysis, And so if it's something that happens on the floor and quality does the root cause analysis, what are we doing? Like, what are we doing if we think that our job is to tell people what to do? And what are we doing if we don't, by not involving the people who should? Like, it's disempowering, and it's counterproductive, because we don't know what's happening. We don't know why things happen. In my book, like, the quality is a facilitator, and I get that quality is kind of is at the bottom of the totem pole, which is an issue. Management commitment. Like, we can't talk about this without talking about management commitment, which is a huge can of worms. So I'll just say, oh, whoops, let's open the lid and close it again. But really, management commitment is very intimately related to the problem that we see right now, and understanding what can management do and engaging them in the process is also something that needs to happen if we want to fix that. Yeah.
Well, and that's a good point, because earlier, Alex, you had said, CAPA systems are, higher up in kind of the system development piece of it, because in quality and food safety, we're developing systems, and we get to play in all kinds of different areas. And this is a more abstract process than the actual programs themselves. So you need to think it in those terms of the actual execution relative to these things and how to implement change in those different areas. And to your point, it's all linked together, right? It doesn't matter. You could be the strongest. Yeah, you could be the strongest corrective action, all kinds of training and everything else. But if you don't have management support and they constantly undercut your findings, you're dead. You have to have that support.
Yeah. I see a couple of questions about audits there. Again, a conversation there's big difference between a checklist audit and a system audit. And we have, I can talk about that again for hours on end. But a checklist audit, if you're starting with the standard and you're just ticking boxes, that's not a strong audit. That is a compliance verification, and that's a job that quality can do every time the standard changes. In my book, it doesn't need to be done more than once when the standard changes, because if you're compliant on the 1st of January, you'll be the same level of compliance on December 5th, okay, or whatever, December 31st next year, whatever. That exercise, and that's what most people are doing for an internal audit, is just checking boxes. And it's important to check boxes, but it's not an audit. And that's work that can be done by somebody that's very technical. You don't need somebody independent from the work to be doing that. But if you're challenging the implementation, okay, so an audit for me is a system audit, and we're challenging the implementation. And if we're challenging the implementation, then we're saying, okay, the program says this. Are we actually doing this here, or we're doing that? Do people know how to do it? Do the records align with this here, or are the records over here? When I look at the records in the plant, is that consistent with, not the records in the plant? When I look at the condition of the plant, is that consistent with what people are telling me, what people know, what people need to know? Are all the parts of the system working together, or not? And that's a system audit.
Yep. And yeah, so the analogy I use for that is it's you're like a detective. The auditor's like a detective. And to use the old example from my childhood is the Detective Columbo, right? He's going in, looking at evidence, asking questions, performing follow-up activities to see if what he is being told matches with the evidence and what they actually see. And then the auditor can draw conclusions from those. It is not, and I think this is the opposite side of it, Olu, that I think we need to identify. It may be easier. What's a strong audit? What's a weak audit? A weak audit is a checklist, right? Yeah, the auditor says, okay, do you, all right, so the first element, 2.1.1, do you have management posters that are signed off? Yes, okay, check. Right, and just going down the list.
Yeah, I mean, 2.1.1 management. So like the policy, like, is it written in a way, like, is it written in a way that people understand? So if you've got a policy on the wall that says something and it says all the words that are in the standard, nobody understands it. 100.0% of those policies are not understood on the floor, you know? And so if we say that I tick the box because you've got a policy written on the wall, and we don't ask people on the floor, what does that policy mean? Well, there's two options. Either let's not bother at all with the policy, okay? And let's say we don't need that policy and let's just take it out of the standard. But really the GFSI says you need a policy, so we need to contend with that. Or else, then let's write the policy in a way that people will understand it. And then when you say you're committed to food safety, people can say, yeah, well, that's what they're saying, but really they're not that committed. Or they can say, well, you know, I'd like it if they fix that chair over there, but that's not really the commitment to food safety. What they said they do is 1, 2, 3, 4, and I'd like them to do 5, 6, 7, 8, but really at least they're doing those 4 things. Because,
right.
You know,
yeah,
but that would be a bit more thorough, and that would be looking at the implementation of a policy rather than just ticking the boxes.
Exactly. Well, and I think
oh, go ahead.
Oh no, I was just going to, kind of tie this in with some of these excellent comments that we're getting here, which is auditors, just like everything else, you need to understand where to properly dive in and where to investigate, and that's where good auditors earn their money. And it's kind of the same with what we're talking about here. Back to our corrective and preventive actions, is the other side of that where I think people fail relative to these programs is they try and do this on everything. And that's not the point either. You need to identify those corrective actions and those things that require investigation and follow-up. Like to your example, Alex, broken chair. Fix the chair, right? You don't need a corrective action on why the chair broke. Exactly. And do we need different chairs and all? No, you're going to bore everybody to death. So my example on this is in past companies I've worked at, we had what we call a quality alert. So if you work in a big food company, you have all kinds of information coming from consumers, good information, bad information, upset customers, and you got to sort through all this information. And the system we put in place was, okay, if we have a complaint for a category, so we'll say like organoleptic, hey, I opened up this product and the texture's terrible or something. And you're like, okay, and you make note of that issue. If you then see 2 more of those issues for that same product code, same plant, same line, oh, I have a potential trend developing. I need to investigate that. And then you send the regional quality person to work with the plant to dig into things. But if you were to try and investigate every single complaint that comes in, good luck. That's all you would do, and you would never get anywhere.
So we're working on a training. Okay, so I think like, so just to kind of continue on what you're saying and what the question about like what's a good audit is. I think right now auditors, like the whole industry knows that there's a problem with auditor competency. Okay, so like that is the GFSI has been working at it for 20 or 30 years, and they are nowhere close to the answer. And so like we're just developing training for external auditors to help raise the bar that way. And part of what I'm doing right now is I'm looking at the definition of terms. So like back to Jose, it says, oh, we need to define terms. The kind of terms that we need to define is, okay, what's significant and what's insignificant. What's significant in one context is very different than what's significant in a different context or in a different scope. So the example you gave is completely insignificant from a food safety standpoint, but absolutely significant from a quality standpoint. As a
Yes.
quality manager, you don't discriminate between foods. Well, I mean, you discriminate, but you've got to deal with both things. So if you see a trend in consumer satisfaction about something, whether it's food safety or not, doesn't make a difference between, like, it's not telling you if you're going to deal with it or not. If you're a food safety auditor and you look at the trend with quality, then you have to say, oh, okay, that's not significant for the scope of what I'm doing today.
Yeah.
But identifying, okay, what's a trend? Okay, what's an incident? What's an isolated incident? What's a trend? And what's a system failure? Those are the definitions that I'm working right now, because I think for an auditor, you need to be able to discriminate between, is this an isolated incident? Is it a trend, or is it a system failure? And I mean, there's if anybody goes, there's a significant recall happening. You know, like if you look at Boar's Head, the report, I mean, they say there's 69 non-conformances. There's not 69 non-conformances. There's 69 non-conformance reports. But on each of those reports, there's a lot of non-conformances. So there's hundreds of non-conformances on that report, okay, in a year. Now that is, like, that's not a listeria issue. This is a system failure with a listeria symptom. Listeria is not the heart of the issue there. Like, of course, there's a huge issue with listeria, which in and of itself is catastrophic. But the issue is much bigger than that. It's a complete failure to recognize that the system was failing, and that, you know, so it's not a trend. We're not at a trend anymore. And those are the kind of things that, I mean, I just want to emphasize how I appreciate Jose's comment that, yes, we need to define terms, because if we want solid audits, we need to have a common understanding of what we're talking about. Otherwise,
yeah, and that, to Austin's point here relative to leadership and commitment, it's a perfect example, right? Because leadership commitment dovetails in very nicely what we're talking around CAPA here, is system failure, right? If you have horrible management commitment, you're going to have horrible systems. And not having a policy poster on the wall doesn't fix that. And if you're not cleaning your plant correctly and you have meat buildup in pumps, and I was reading those reports too, it's like, oh my God. And that means that it's catastrophic failure in, you know, auditing terms. It's critical. It's a critical failure. They've completely destroyed the system.
But like, I'm gonna be the devil's advocate for just a quarter of a second here, okay? So from a management standpoint, like, you know, I think there was a failure from the management. Like I don't know about Boar's Head. Like I'm just thinking about kind of the general idea, okay? If there's a company that comes over, I don't want to say what happened there or what didn't happen there, because I don't know what happened there. But let's say I'm a food manufacturer and I get a certificate for whatever. Okay, I've got my GFSI thing, and they're telling me that I'm good enough. So I'm thinking, okay, safe. I'm thinking safe is here and certified is there. Now we know that's not true. We know that you can be certified and not be safe. Okay, but for a manager like that, but that makes no sense. Like we need to have a system where people are certified, they're always safe. Okay, so like it's harder to be certified than to be safe. But also if every day, you know, like you've got the FSIS inspector that are in place and they're giving you corrective non-conformances, but you fix them one at a time. And it's like, it's kind of just like the game that you're playing. Okay, you find a problem, I fix a problem. You find a problem, you fix a problem. You like the management becomes kind of used to that dynamic, and they think that's normal. So their concept of normality becomes completely abhorrent to us. And I'm not defending that concept. I'm not saying that's a good idea. I'm saying we need to do a better job, and the government in that case needs to do a better job. You shouldn't wait until there's 70 non-conformance report to say there's a big problem happening here. So I think management commitment most definitely is an area where we need to dig, but it's more complicated than pointing fingers.
Yeah, absolutely.
We need to understand what's going on.
Yeah, and this gets into these common areas of failure, right, that we were talking about. So no training, no support, you're on your own, you don't understand the system, all these type of things, to your point, contribute to overall failure.
Somebody says that top management is responsible for the outcome of the system. And just to be clear, I absolutely agree with that. Like I'm not I'm not saying anything contradictory to that. Like they are totally responsible for it, whether they are set up to fail or not. I mean, sure, they could work harder to succeed, and there's lots of resources out there. I'm just saying sometimes the message, might be
Well,
mixed.
no,
But some
I
people
agree.
really like to not hear the message as well. So
Yeah. No, that makes sense. Well, and I think part of this too, right? And this is something we talk about on the chat quite a bit, is if you function in your role in quality and food safety in kind of this nice little bubble, and you try and manage everything that you have control over, you're going to fail, right? Because in any environment, you have a team. We'll keep with our production facility example, and you need their support. And this gets back to your point, right? Is if you investigate every little thing and you pull it, and this is where I think they get in trouble, because then this gets to our next point, is it's looked like it's a burden in the plant, right? Oh God, here comes the quality manager, and he wants to put together a team for corrective actions, and everybody runs away, right? Because it's like, geez, I've got my job to do. I'm the production manager. I've got product to make. I don't have time for this stuff. I'm just interested in getting the product out the door. I don't have time to be on your team, right? And it's a burden, and you have to be able to manage that. What do you think of that, Alex?
Well, I think so Cortland and Austin have, like, they're talking about, does management understand their responsibility? One of the things I would say that we do every single time we start with people, like every time we work with people, we say, okay, you're here, you want to go there. Here is not being certified. Being certified is part of this, but there's a lot more than being certified that you want to be if you're here. And so there's going to be a number of steps that we have to go from here to here. And so management understanding their responsibility is most definitely part of what being here is. But the very first thing we do here is that we define responsibilities for all the members of the team. And so we make sure that everybody, that we define them in simple ways, and that in ways that people can understand. And so saying that the top manager is like the captain on the boat, and the captain on the boat, they're responsible for knowing where the boat is going, and that's just linking to KPIs and what is safe and all that kind of stuff. And then, if the boat is going in the right direction, then the captain's doing a good job. And then if the boat's going kind of veering off, then the captain of the boat needs to bring the boat back, in line. And then if something happens, if the boat hits it's an iceberg or something, and the boat goes down, then they're on deck and they need to manage the crisis. And so understanding what is safe is most definitely their job, and their management team is responsible for keeping the boat on track. In other words, it's not quality's job to make sure that the food is safe. It is the top manager's job to make sure that the food is safe. So just like and that needs to happen from the very beginning. And every food safety standard says we need to have job responsibilities and things like that. I believe that auditors don't know how to evaluate that. And because they don't know how to evaluate that, everybody gets a pass, whether they deserve a pass or not. So
right. Well, and so I would add an "and" to that, right? So our job within these systems is to teach them and show them and their responsibilities as senior management in that facility. And it's that hierarchy, right? It goes from the operator to the supervisor to the department manager to the quality manager to the plant manager. And all of those different groups are responsible, and they all have different levels of action that they can take relative to that. And the plant manager needs to be absolutely involved in those processes and understand their responsibility. That is, it's like the Park Doctrine on the legal side. The CEO of a company cannot delegate the responsibility of food safety to subordinates. That responsibility stays with them. And if it's indefensible for the CEO of a company to say, well, I didn't know this was going on, but it's that quality guy's job over to fix it. No, unacceptable. It's your responsibility.
Yeah. And they can delegate some aspects. They can say, okay, I've got a facilitator, somebody who's responsible for informing me of what's happening, somebody who's responsible for putting programs in place. But if the programs are working or not, like understanding what are the responsibilities for the top manager, like at every layer, what are the responsibilities? In the same way, quality, nobody reports to quality. That production's got a big budget, maintenance has got a big budget. So who has an impact on food safety? Like production has a much bigger impact in a way on food safety than quality can have, in the sense that they have a much bigger budget, and so they have there's so much more that they do on a day-to-day basis that has the potential of making the food unsafe. Same thing for maintenance. So if everybody plays their job, plays their role, and then quality or whoever the food safety lead is can make sure that the programs are solid. Not even, that's probably even a responsibility for the management team more so than for maintenance, but they can facilitate that. Yeah.
So Morgan had a really good comment here, and good job here, Morgan.
Yeah.
I love it. When I was at the plant, I involved our QA team in finding and reporting CAPAs. The sense of responsibility they felt with the opportunities was great. This is exactly what she's talking about here, is what you need to be doing. It's the plant's responsibility for these things. And so part of this, again, is your job as the head of quality and food safety in a production facility is to facilitate and to teach and educate and involve other groups. What training? So for in this example, and I love what Morgan's talking about here relative to this, is have you actually trained other people in your facility in the processes of corrective and preventive action and how to use those tools? Because guess what? They can use those in their job too, right? So if I'm the production manager, I can use those tools and evaluate the information in my area separate from what the quality guy is asking for. And I can do a better job in my role. Do they understand that?
It's always kind of the pyramid where you want operations to be dealing with you want every department to be dealing with their own issues and identifying their own issues. And then you want verification to come over, and verification is not necessarily quality. It can be that multidisciplinary team that verifies that. And then you can have kind of the real quality assurance that makes sure that the verification program, that all the managers are managing their own area or their own, the programs they're responsible for.
Yeah, I love what Ryan's talking about here, is that he works with a company where 90% of their food safety team are frontline team members. Ownership. Beautiful.
Yeah.
Love it. So,
yeah, so
right,
I think
you don't want this. This is a privilege to be involved with these type of activities in a plant. Part of what I always teach, food safety and quality managers, is the more you can be forward-looking in how you do your job, the better off you're going to be. If you're creating a quality report of issues that took place over the last quarter, who cares, right? It's all done. It's all history. Everybody already knows all of that. You're not adding value. What type of things can you do going forward to improve? And what Ryan's talking about here is exactly that. So I love it. Boy, we're getting tons of good comments here, guys. So really, we're kind of touching on this, right? Is how can we, and this is really where the rubber hits the road, and I want to make sure that we get to this in this conversation today, is how do we fix this, Alex? How can we possibly fix this? Right? It's great that we sit here and bitch about it, but how can we fix this?
So one of the things that like, this is a huge problem. Okay, so that's a huge problem. And when you fix a problem, you always need to understand the problem before you're fixing it. So when you're asking me, how do we fix this? There are some things that I know for sure need to happen between here and there. Okay. But right now, I'm not quite sure that we understand what the problem is. Like when we say, what's the root cause analysis? We need to define what good is. We need to understand where we're at. And then we can see what are the actions. Now, some of those actions are pretty straightforward. Okay. Some of the actions like defining terms. One of the things that we've talked about, defining terms for CAPA, for instance, okay, and understanding the difference between the terms we use and the concepts we're thinking about, okay, understanding the why, fixing the immediate situation, all that. We can use different terms, but whatever, because getting BRC and SQF and the GFSI and like all the regulatory agencies to use the same language, I'm not taking that one on. Maybe if we can understand those concepts, that's one thing. Some of the things are going to be more difficult. And when we talk about, but we need to understand, we need to really understand the problem. So that's the first step before we can make a path to go all the way to the end. So that's the first thing. That's what I'm working on right now, or what we're working on right now.
Gotcha. Well, and I love what we were talking in the chat here is a big chunk of this, and this is kind of woven through our entire conversation here, is risk, right? Is evaluating the risk. Is that broken chair a risk to food safety?
Well, okay, so like part of like, there's a couple of steps that I know for sure. We need to define the terms, and those terms, we need to decide when those terms are applied. Okay, so rating, we all use rating for nonconformances. And I say there's like 4 ratings. Everybody says minor, major, critical. I think those 3 are very important. Minor, major, critical. There's one before that. Like there's perfect. Okay, perfectly perfect. Bryan doesn't like it, but I say this is where Plato is with his perfect forms. That's completely irrelevant. So there's a line between kind of not perfect but good enough, and the chair would be something like that. Like it's not perfect, but it's good enough. We don't need to do anything about it. So rating, and then saying what do we need to do for each one of those levels? Okay, what type of action is a preventive action necessary for a minor, or should we start thinking about preventive action for a major or for a critical? So kind of layering those controls so that we can have risk-based responses, and we can not right now. I think when we look at the root cause, we'll see that we're overburdening. We're burdening everybody, and we need to reduce the burden. So that's one of the things that we're working on. I'm sorry I don't have time to read all those comments. I'll read them after. But
they're amazing comments. Yeah.
but then again, like because that path, there's a lot of stuff. Actually, one of the things we've done, and if you want, or Ellen can put the link. I think what we've set up a little kind of community so that we can continue that conversation, because the conversation is not going to be done at the end of this talk. Unfortunately, I'd love it if we could fix it all today, right here, right now. But I think part of going from here to here is to have a conversation and kind of really understand what's going on and get a lot of people involved. I've just kind of seen a few things, but saying, okay, mandatory training for upper management. I think so. Like, I think there needs to be something like that. Like, I think, and part of what we're doing is we're kind of working on auditor training. So, because if I say evaluating management commitment during a certification audit will involve those 4 questions. Tell me, like asking the top manager, what are your responsibilities for food safety? And if I can come up with a good definition of what's acceptable and what's not acceptable, then that's driving towards that. Whether we say you have to take the training or not, if they fail without the training, then that's a good point. What's the food safety status in your facility? The top manager should understand the challenges in their facilities and what's happened in the last year. Often that's not the case, And so I think there's a lot of things we can do to move things forward.
Yeah, I did.
I did. Jose had a couple of comments that are getting. What was? Do you keep track, Bryan? Are you so much faster than I am, or?
Well, so I'm reading through these here as well. And so, too many comments to pull up here. So we're getting some amazing participation here. But really, I think, and we've kind of woven this into the conversation, is on this risk-based point. So my earlier example with complaints, right? Quality complaints, texture, things like that. You're looking for trends and deciding when you need to take action. Food safety is different, right? If you have food safety complaints, every food safety plate gets investigated, right? You don't wait for a trend on food safety, right? Because now you're approaching items from a risk-based standpoint. So, I mean, some of the examples we were talking about is supplier management, right? You're managing your suppliers by risk, or you should be. You're looking at much higher levels of scrutiny with suppliers based upon risk, relative to your process, ready-to-eat materials, things of this nature. So your programs, to your point, Alex, are going to vary depending upon your requirements relative to response in terms of risk. So environmental monitoring, zone 1, 2, 3, and 4, those are zones of risk when you look at these different type of activities. So for example, and this is always a good way to look at whether an auditor or a quality manager correctly reacting to things is, does the quality manager freak out if there's some cobwebs in a back warehouse that nobody uses? No, they shouldn't be, right? It's just, clean it. It's the chair example again. You don't need to reinvent the team and put everybody together for that. Just have maintenance go out there.
When you pull a cover over a pump and it smells like rotting meat, then everybody should freak out, because that's a significant, that's a complete, bam. Exactly. And you need to be thinking about it in those terms. I love these conversations. This is fantastic. But we're running out of time now. I want to make sure that
Oh, all right. So part of my role in this is to, at this 5-minute mark say, whoo, okay, we need to summarize, and we're
Yeah.
already at that mark. So let's kind of bring this back up to the 30,000 foot level, Alex.
Yeah.
Is relative to our conversation today. What would you like people to leave with this? What are you thinking?
Well, clearly, that's a topic that is that everybody agrees that is super important and super interesting.
Yeah.
And we're not going to solve it today. I'd love to come up with the solution, but really, what we're working on is we're working on first to define what we're going to be looking at what's happening here. We're starting to put a few tools on a map, kind of on a path to get it all fixed and define what that good thing is, so that we can all shoot for that. Like that's what we're doing right now. If you want to see, we've got, like, if you look at LinkedIn, we're posting regularly on this. We've got a couple of webinars that are upcoming. So we've got another webinar on October 3rd, again with Tammy Van Buren and with Kima WQS on this, just to take that the next step to define what those terms are within SQF, what are the expectations there. So we're doing that. We've got a webinar on environmental monitoring, and there's no doubt we're going to be looking at risk, actually integrating risk formally, like, not just saying, oh, it's a risk-based thing, because that's what everybody does, but saying, okay, specifically, how do you integrate risk in your environmental monitoring program? We're doing that, again, with KEMA, but with BRCGS, that one. And I think we've talked about maybe our next chat in November, we could talk about environmental monitoring. I'd be surprised if we didn't weave environmental monitoring and CAPA together, because that is very important. But all that's happening, and then, like, everybody, like, I'll go through all those comments after, and maybe follow up on a few. So thank you so much for all those good comments. And if anybody's interested in being part of that conversation, then we've got there's a link over here on the little platform that we've put together, where we're going to kind of try to concentrate our resources and our efforts, because I think it's gonna I'm afraid of that conversation building like that, and I want to be able to kind of build and then bring it back to something that's digestible.
Exactly.
So those are my parting words.
Here's that link to that group again.
Having me, Bryan.
Yeah, and so here's that link again, and again, this is a free activity. So go and sign up for that, please, and join that community, because there's a lot of conversation around it. And kind of what I'm taking away from this today as well, Alex, is what we think is a pretty straightforward activity. You've got a few lines in the standards that talk about it, not a lot. Exceptionally complex. Exceptionally complex.
Very complex.
And if you're gonna fail if you try and take this all on yourself. And I see this time and time again, right? Where quality people think that this is theirs and that it's their responsibility to do it, and they're going to harass and bother and beg and plead and yell and whatever they need to do in their facility to get this done. And that's the wrong approach. You're going to burn out, and you're not taking the right approach. So it's kind of like your internal audit processes. If you're the head of the quality systems and you're the quality manager or whatever, and your job with the internal audit process is not to be the auditor. Your job is to lead the audit team. You need to have a group of people in your facility who are trained, who understand how to audit, who create corrective actions, who follow up on those activities. You are then managing that activities. Your job as the quality person in a production facility or a company or whatever, your job is to manage this program. And so often, right, we talk about it on this chat all the time. Technical skills, people skills, right? Really what we're talking about here relative to this is the ability to be able to influence and persuade in your organization. Critical, absolutely critical. You need to be able to work with the management team in your facility and say, all right, here's what we're doing. Here's why we're doing it. Here's the outcome we're expecting. To your point, Alex, here's where we need to be relative to this bottom basic metric. And that's not where we want to be. We want to be up here. How do we get there? And having these conversations today is a microcosm of the conversations that should be taking place in every frickin' plant, and they're not.
So I want to completely agreed. And to add one thing to that, like, I think we had a great conversation, and thank you so much to everybody that contributed on the chat, because I think part of what is needed to go from here to here is for people to join in and for us to all have those conversations. So I think that's paramount, because if we want to implement what you're talking about, kind of going, for me, it's going from the role of a technical expert, quality as a technical expert, to quality as a facilitator. And that is a huge shift that needs to happen. And
100%. So
to be continued,
everybody. And this is why I love having you on the chat, Alex. You're a font of information, and it's always an amazing conversation. And the comments in here and the participation was fantastic, and that's a testament to that. So thank you for everything that you do. Really appreciate it.
Well, thank you, Bryan.
And thank you, of course, to everybody else.
I'm sending the exact same your way.
Thank you very much.
Chat.
Whew. Awesome. And so with that, guys, we're going to close out the chat here for this week. Fantastic chat. And of course, next week, we'll be back with another amazing chat and another expert in food safety and quality assurance for our next food safety chat. So of course, the same time, 8 a.m. Mountain, 10 a.m. Eastern on LinkedIn and YouTube, where we live stream. And thank you, everybody. In the meantime, enjoy your weekend. Have a great time. And we'll do it all again next week. Thanks again, Alex. Thank you, everyone. And we'll see you. Have a good one.